Game week one of the Premier League has officially kicked off. It was a mega weekend of football, but we are glad to have it back. Today, we are discussing five key things we learned from game week one. As always, there were shocks and surprises amongst the entire weekend. Let's kick it off. We'll do it in chronological order. Of course, on the Friday night, it was Liverpool versus Bournemouth. Guys, let's kick it off with the Liverpool. What did we learn from game week one in Liverpool's performance?
Well, I think it's Liverpool get the job done, but don't look as convincing as what every pundit and sort of predictor had of them winning the league and going to win it kind of easily, some people did say. So I think it's sort of they're just a tad shaky compared to what people expected. But at the end of the day, they did get the job done. Bournemouth showed sort of, good fight in it. But, you've got to remember, Liverpool scored 4 goals. Bournemouth's defence has been destroyed over the summer. So it wasn't as convincing, I think, as what people had made out it would be. But Liverpool eventually, they get the win, they get these late goals. Is it sort of a bit too early, a bit like Arsenal a few seasons ago, where they were scoring late goals just to win games? But getting it over the line in the first game, that's it, job done. But yeah, looking a tad shaky.
Yeah, I think this is the first season where Liverpool are going into it as favourites for the champions. Um, so therefore, with the money spent as well, it's probably the first time in a long time that pressure's been there for them to deliver. And they did deliver on Friday night. They had 19 shots, 10 on target, whereas Bournemouth had 10 and 3 on target. However, of course, that doesn't show the true story because Bournemouth actually played really, really well. And those two goals were real testament to Bournemouth's confidence growing back into the game, which did put a lot of question marks over Liverpool. There were question marks slightly a bit following their defeat to Palace in the Community Shield, but this really spotlighted it. And what, even regardless of first game or not, it was how Liverpool would respond. And they huffed and they puffed and they eventually blew the Bournemouth door down. It was shaky for a first game of the season. We all expected a comfortable win, but it was a win nonetheless. And that's the important thing. It's something to build on. They can't really be doing this in their next game, but with the spotlight on them, they've delivered, and it was a champion's performance.
Yeah, I think the real concern is them defensively, right? We got to, as good as they were in attack, we all expected them to score three or four goals. I think for Liverpool fans, obviously, celebrate the 3 points, but I think they'd be a little bit concerned. Van Dijk, I said it in the Community Shield, is his time passing? Obviously, it's premature after one game, but there was a few various tweets and things that went viral, kind of mocking Van Dijk's defending where he was running away from the ball, and no wonder he never gets dribbled past because he just runs away. Obviously, that might be a bit dramatic, but I think for Liverpool, the real concern potentially is the defence, right? Frimpong, Kirkes both subbed off before 60 minutes. Bit of a handicap for those who stuck with him in FPL, but you can't be conceding 2 goals in the manner they did. So I think that is the only thing looking forward. Can Liverpool improve defensively? We know that sides who win the league have to be good defensively at some point. So yeah, maybe a little bit of a red flag for Liverpool. But yeah, time will tell, let's say. We'll move on to the next game of the weekend, which again in order was Aston Villa versus Newcastle. All the talk pre build up to the Prem has obviously been about Isak. Newcastle's basically them being mugged off all summer is pretty much what's been going on. They have now signed Jacob Murphy for about 40 million, which I don't think solves their problem. How badly do we think they need one, a striker, or two, simply the Isak situation resolved? Because he there could still be a way that he stays at the club. That's my thoughts. Little apology video. If he starts banging in goals, I do think a lot of the fans would forgive him. So do we think they need a striker, or they just need to sort out Isak's situation?
They need a striker. Um, I think if they would have gone into this game and won, everyone would have said, "Oh, who needs a striker?" So, or at least scored, they wouldn't have been too fast. The fact that they didn't score, wasted some chances, immediately put that pressure on them and put the spotlight on them. Is Jacob Ramsey going to be the answer to them for that? I mean, time will tell. I think Eddie Howe will certainly get the best out of him. But it was still a solid performance from Newcastle for a first game of the season. I thought they would have taken advantage of Konsa's red card, but I think it was best for Newcastle to go there and not get beaten. First game or not, that was important. And they didn't. They held their resolve and held very well. But you need a striker. They need that. That's quite clear and that's obvious. Whether that's Isak or not, I don't know. But that they have to get it done. And they've got a bigger game in the Isak derby against Liverpool next week. So that's going to be really testing. But they can't let this drag on. If they got a on Saturday, the longer they let this drag on, they could end up being further and further behind points wise, where they have to catch up. You can't just then panic buy either. So has to get resolved quickly.
The only thing to note, though, just quickly, like we've seen a nice different comparison. We've seen City win the league without a striker. The way Newcastle played, like although they didn't score, they absolutely, utterly dominated Villa on their own turf, particularly in the first half. And Villa are a side who we've all backed and said they're going to be great again. They've got a good manager, good squad. They're going to be in Europe. So maybe, and Newcastle fans, let us know your thoughts in the comments. But that performance to me indicates that maybe there is a way they can play without a striker. I know they didn't score, so the obvious argument is, oh, if you had a finisher, you would have scored. But putting in that level of performance away to Villa in the first game, creating just under 1.5 XG, on another day they win that game and everyone's going, bloody hell, what a start for Newcastle. So I'm not saying they don't need the situation resolved, but if I'm a Newcastle fan, I'd be very, very happy with that performance personally, even though they didn't win.
It's long term. I mean, if I was a Villa fan, sorry, Jamie, I'll let you go in a second, but if I was a Villa fan, I'd be fuming because this is one of the things where I've had question marks over Unai Emery all the time. This should have been a game he takes advantage, and they didn't. You're right, Newcastle were the better side. 16 shots, Villa only had three. You'd think it's just weird how that's come out. But long term, they need a striker. This is very similar to Arsenal last season. Long term, how many points are they going to drop if they've not got someone who knows how to put it in the back of the net? It's okay for now. But when it gets to November, when it gets to December, when they're really tested and maybe an injury or two, that's when it comes under pressure. But tactically, they were perfect. They were perfect. And this is why Eddie Howe is probably the most important part of the Newcastle machine because in my opinion, only he can grind out these results under this much sort of spotlight.
I think the key takeaway is, like you said, they were very, very good. Newcastle have had a terrible transfer window. I think all their fans will admit that, but they're still actually a very good side. They've really only lost Isak in this. So them actually, being very good at Villa isn't that much of a surprise. But if Isak was playing for them, they'd have got 3 points. And what Reece is saying with them dropping points, that's already 2. Because they would have won that game with a proper striker. Whether it is Isak or if they sign someone else, I think they would have won the game. And that's the biggest concern for it. Now, you will get certain games where Gordon, Elanga, all these players will get goals. But you can't rely on them so much. And I know, Jordan, you mentioned sort of City doing it, but we had an absolute extraordinary season by Gundogan scoring so many goals. And we had the likes of other players around getting their sort of 15 goals each. Like, I think that season we had 4 or 5 players that were definitely over 10, close to 15. So that's where it can work. But that's a lot of pressure to put on the side. And I don't think most teams can get away with it. It's sort of like City won't do it. City have signed Haaland for a reason. We don't want to be doing that again because it won't work out. It can work out for parts of the season. Sort of like Newcastle can definitely go and beat Liverpool. They can go and score 2 or 3 goals. But then next week they'll play whoever they've got and fail to score. We're missing 3 sitters where a striker would put them away. So I think that's the biggest concern for them. The overall is they've still got a very good midfield, still got a solid defence. It's one missing piece kind of really thing. And if I'm a Newcastle fan, even though you probably hate him at the moment, if he comes back and plays, that's I think the best case scenario. and football fans are fickle. All will be forgiven. They won't forget. They will forgive though, and I think that's the Newcastle situation. Sadly for them.
Yeah, agreed. Newcastle fans, put in the comments who you do want to sign, assuming Isak does leave. Let's move on. So this one, I think you could probably argue, is a bit of a two-part lesson from something we learn. Sunderland 3, West Ham nil. My key takeaway from this is that, Jamie, I know we said it jokingly in the chat. I'm saying your prediction's done already. I don't think Sunderland on that performance are going to come 20th. Like that is. Look, it's one game, it's 3 points at the end of the day, but to put on that display in your first game back in the Prem for so long, the atmosphere was rocking, a clean sheet, and you're all as many new signs as they've made, all the old boys from last season putting in the goals. I was honestly blown away with how good they were. So my takeaway personally was that Sunderland are not going to be bottom, and they've got a serious chance of staying up. What was your lesson from that game, I guess?
Well, mine was West Ham are in for a very long season, because this should be the game where you get. The problem is it's sort of like we've seen it in the past with certain other games. You get your first game at home when you're a promoted side, the place should be rocking. You know, you're back in the Premier League, and it's no surprise that Sunderland was rocking, and it was a great atmosphere, and that helps the players do it. We see. I remember years ago when Arsenal had to go away to Brentford at it. Brentford's ground was rocking. It was a Friday night game, I remember, but that helps you get over the line. Brentford stayed up, so it sort of could be in good stead for it. But if Sunderland fans couldn't get up for that game, what game are they bloody going to get up for? Apart from sort of playing Newcastle, it's it. I still will stay with my prediction. I still think they will get relegated. If they're 20th to 20th, if they're not, they're not. Like I'm not gonna split hairs on it. But yeah, from my point of view, it was more the fact that West Ham should have been starting their season well because their fans are already peed off with everything going on around the club. They're not happy, obviously, with the stadium, the owners, the signings, and to be honest, they probably won't be happy with Potter within a month or so if it goes downhill, if it continues to go downhill. So I understand where you're coming from. You're looking at the positive from the Sunderland thing, but I've seen it more from the negative of West Ham that really draws them probably in to the relegation battle, which I don't think any of us three had them in to be a relegation battle. Not saying we wouldn't have seen them flying up the table, but we didn't have them that low down. So I think it's going to be a long season for them because that was a game that they should be trying to win.
Yeah, Potter is under early pressure, I think, given how they finished last season. I'm certainly not going to slag off West Ham considering we play them Friday. I'll probably say how bad they are and then we'll go and lose. But yeah, Reece, what did you make? How did you see this, I guess? Better from Sunderland or worse from West Ham? What kind of side are you on?
It was worse from West Ham. Look, Sunderland were brilliant. You know that I rate Sunderland very highly with their recruitment and their approach to recruitment. They've not got much wrong. Um, this performance from West Ham was so poor. So poor. The goals were poor to concede. It just nobody turned up. They doubled up on Wan-Bissaka and that was it. There was no creativity, no chances. Again, I know I say you can and you can't look too much into the first game of the season, but this is damning. The worst thing for West Ham, they've got off to the worst possible start. If they'd had a 1-0 defeat, everyone would be like, okay, like, let's know. But this was 3-0, all in the second half, let's not forget. Um, and West Ham is such a passionate fan base, it's such a strong fan base. They're on their back already. It makes it 10 times harder. If they go and lose to Chelsea, that's 2 defeats from 2. Think of last season. They got off to a pretty tough start, didn't they? And they just never recovered. And this is
Just
a
to
big thing
jump
for
in,
Klopp. Yeah, go on.
Reece, just to prove your point, I've just had a look at their fixtures. So they've got obviously us at home, then they've got Wolves away, Forest away, Spurs. It- you're right. This could get ugly pretty quickly.
And it's
Like it's going to go downhill potentially.
and it's one of the clubs where when it's toxic, it is toxic. West Ham fans have high expectations, and I mean, rightly so. And have they been met? I don't think so. Um, so they have every right to be upset. And this should have been a game where they thought, okay, if we don't get results in our next 3 or 4, we get something. And for Graham Potter as well, he's a man under big scrutiny about can he cut it in the Premier League. The Chelsea job, I think a lot of us will pass that. Now is a real time to show he can do it. He's got decent players there. They need more recruitment. There's no doubt about that. Some of the players he didn't even play. Who you think why? They're probably their better players. But if you fit the system, you fit the system. But this was poor. This could be a rough season. They need to put it right against Chelsea, which they're more than capable of doing. But realistically, they need to put it right against Wolves and Nottingham Forest. That's my opinion. You need to be beating these teams. It's all good beating Chelsea, but that doesn't get you anything if you don't beat those other ones.
Yeah, absolutely fair. Let's move on to Man City. One of the highlights of the weekend was obviously not Haaland's goals. For those who were brave enough to leave him out of the FPL teams, they got humbled pretty quickly. But well, I was going to say that the star of the show was Reijnders. The cameraman, for those watching the game, my God, the cameraman loved him. Walking into half time, after half time, during the game. I think about 60% of the TV time was on his face. So maybe that highlights just how good he was. Jamie, from your perspective, how good was the Reinders performance outside of just City winning 4-0?
So just quickly, if he plays like that every week, the cameraman should always be on him because what a beautiful footballer, let alone man. But look, the Reinders performance was sort of everything sort of he tried paid off. It was right, and it was. I think he might have misplaced one pass in the whole game, sort of thing. It's if he needed to make the pass where he's 1-2 him with the winger, he knew what to present, like how to play it. He knew when to run with it. He knew when to take on players. Like if you look at our first goal, he doesn't get the assists or any sort of claims to it, but it's because of him we scored that goal. It was sort of taking on three. I think it's three Wolves players, then playing the ball out wide for it to be crossed into Haaland. It's the sort of way, even if you talk about this is what excluding his goals, it's sort of taken away the sort of little pass that he made with Cherky before he got the ball to put it in the back of the net. And then you got the goal where he's on his weaker foot, left foot, no hesitation, bottom corner. For what I'm seeing around, and I think it's fairly right, is there's barely been a better midfield debut performance, sort of in the Premier League. Not the ones that I can really remember. Other people may do. Do let us know in the comments if you think there was a better Premier League debut from a midfielder. Because the last one I remember that had sort of as impactful was Aguero. That was off the bench where he scored 2 and got 1 assist. Kind of thing. You don't see it that often. And he's just gone. You know what? I was one of the best, if not the best, midfielder in Serie A. And he's gone into the Premier League, and now people are already talking about him possibly being the best already. That's how good this player is. And it only took me 15 minutes to watch him in the Club World Cup to go, yeah, that's your position. It's sorted. But yeah, what do you guys make of it? You saw it sort of more on the TV, so you could see a wider angle. I could see it from the corner flag at Wolves.
Yeah, he's a brilliant talent, and look, I said this back in the Euros. Maybe City needs him as a scout because you could tell then there was no hype about him in the Euros. No one was speaking about him, but you could just see he just had the ability on the ball, the movement, the speed, the skill. Like he just had it all. So it's good to see. Obviously, it's annoying he's at City, but it's good to see his talent has been recognised. Someone's brought him to the Prem, and he's gone and done that on his debut. Like when you add in a couple of goals in pre-season as well, suddenly we're looking at that going, bloody hell, could this be one of the signings of the season? Look, it's game week 1. We can't get too carried away, but very, very clearly from that performance, he's very technically sound. He can do a bit of the defensive side. He can do a bit of the attacking side. And you know what? Like maybe attacking is the best place for him. I think that Jamie, you said it like, and I said the reason for not having him in the FPL, could he be too defensive? Could he be put in that position? I think on that evidence, you've got to play him in an attacking role. And if FPL metrics are an indication of success, he's already gone up in price on that. So that's how keen people are to overreact to his performance.
I think with that is you've got to play him in the in between. Ideally, we'll have Rodri back fit, and then he plays in front of Rodri, so he can
Mm.
do the defensive and the attacking. And then you let someone like a Foden, a Cherky go in front, and I think that's his perfect role. Like a Gundogan, I think he's got a mix of sort of Bernardo Silva in terms of his dribbling ability and Gundogan in terms of sort of the way he carries the ball and passes around and gets some of these goals. And I think that's a big, big compliment to be put into two City greats.
Yeah, I think you can add in as well for Man City more generally. This could suggest again, it's one result. We can't get carried away. It could suggest you are going to compete for the title. Wolves didn't do enough to threaten you, but despite the doubts, you kept the clean sheet. So yeah, really, really positive start for Man City. Reece, what did you make of the game?
Yeah, all round perfection, particularly from Reijnders. Um, I know a lot of people wondering how they were going to play replace Kevin De Bruyne, and looks like they've done that. Too many clubs go for an unproven 19, 20-year-old, and City have just got in there for a like-for-like replacement. He's 27. That's exactly what they needed to do, and he's delivered straight away. Um, yes, the scoreline was 4-0, but Wolves are not going to be that easy going forward. So it's going to be interesting to see how, he fares. But I think it's quite obvious that we've seen from him that he's going to be a key part to City getting a title challenge back underway. And how he's going to be stopped is going to be critical. But outstanding performance. Like I said, first game of the season, going away to Wolves, a lot of teams wouldn't have fancied that. Especially with how sort of much more positive it seems to be around Molyneux at the moment. And he was great. So what more can you say, right? The stats were there. One goal, one assist, three shots, 82 touches. That's not a bad debut. There's certainly been a lot worse.
All right. Let's move on to our final lesson we learned, and that is, of course, the Man United versus Arsenal game on Sunday afternoon. Again, two kind of different opinions on this. I think Arsenal, for you, Reece, I'd be keen to hear your thoughts on the result. Because it felt like the result and the performance were maybe two separate things. So what did you make from an Arsenal perspective?
I think overall there's been a complete exaggeration to things. Like I had Arsenal to lose on Sunday because I thought United seemed a little bit more positive, bit more positivity around the club. They've made the right signings. And I'm surprised people couldn't see that. Regardless of players talking about it, we could see it. And for Arsenal, this was a horrible first game for them. It was a horrible one. Like most clubs wouldn't have wanted to go to Old Trafford with that confidence and that positivity. Um, and they got a 1-0 win. And everyone says that the performance was rubbish, etc. But the reality is when Arsenal play poorly, they don't win. They've gone there today, weathered the storm, and taken the win. That's what champions do. They take those wins. This is a key game, whether you play it on the first game of the season, the second, the fifth, the 10th, the 38th. They had to get something there. And they did. And that's a real mentality to do that. Um, Great set piece goal, regardless of that. And Arsenal did have a few chances and shots themselves, but I think tactically, once they got the goal, they knew to sit back and hold it. United had no choice but to attack. So from an Arsenal perspective, it was a good all-round performance. They do this against Leeds, then it's not obviously, and they don't get a result, then questions will be asked. But they did exactly what they should have done. Get the goal, shut up shop and go home. And they did. And that's impressive. And like I said, United, once they get going, they'll be much better. But nobody would want it to have gone there for the first game of the season. So fair play for Arsenal for doing it, getting the job done. That's the important thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's just
I do
go on.
agree. I do agree with you, Reece. There, for Arsenal, it's a tough game to go to. No matter when you play United, there's always something about it. And going away to Old Trafford is not. It's never an easy game. I know United haven't been, United of the old. where they're actually, winning Premier League titles. But you still don't want to go there, and getting the 3 points is all that mattered for Arsenal. And it also showed that their defence is still probably the best in the league, and that's what they needed to do. Their whole point was we need to improve in attack by getting a striker and getting sort of probably improving on the left wing. So that was their main sort of duty, and I think at Old Trafford, getting the win is more important than the performance. However, I do agree also with Reese, when they play Leeds next at home, if their performance is at the sort of standard that game was, that's when I'd raise alarm bells for them, because it just matters so much differently. And it could be that of going, even if Arsenal win, let's say they beat Leeds 1-0 but didn't perform too great, you've got to be concerned because they're going to Anfield. They've got hard games at the start, so I think it does matter about getting the performance up to the right level. But some games, if they go and beat Liverpool away at Anfield, like if they have a terrible performance at Leeds, terrible performance at Liverpool, but win, it kind of does change the narrative. But I think it always depends on who you play. I think that matters the most. But my biggest take out of that game was Arsenal still probably the best defensive side in the league, and I'd be surprised if anyone concedes less than them. And if they do, and it's one of the sort of City, Liverpool, Chelsea, they'll win the league because I think they'll get the goals as well. But yeah, I'd say Arsenal should be positive about that win, and I think the media's slightly over exaggerated how well United played. I think United played fairly well, and if you said that was a 1-1 game, you'd probably go, yeah, fine. But they've kind of taken it like they should have won the game, and I think that would have flattered them, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I thought Amarim's comments were interesting. He said that result proves that they can beat any team in the league, which is a bit of a weird
By
comment.
losing, what a stupid comment! It's one of those
Yeah,
stupid comments managers make. Makes
yeah.
no sense.
I mean, look, my takeaway, to be honest, was actually more about United. I think the difference, although they did lose the game, the difference in performance, intensity, and pretty much everything was there. So for me, the story is that United are going to be a lot better this season. Um, Sesko didn't do much. Obviously, only came on. For Arsenal, Gyökeres, did about 25 hair flicks and had about 3 touches. So there's maybe concerns there around whether he's going to perform going forward. But yeah, the bottom line is Arsenal, if your glass is half full, you're taking it as a great result and game management, and that's what champions do. If you're a little bit more pessimistic, you're saying we weren't there performance wise. And, if United did score one of those chances, you'd be having a whole different conversation. But I guess that is football at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean that is pretty much it. Have you boys got anything more to add from lessons learned over the weekend?
I would say just that every fan across the country should just remain patient. Not all performances are, it's not all win and lost in the first game of the season. Champions have lost the first game of the season on many occasions. It's being patient and see what you can do. I think that goes for a lot of fans from an Arsenal perspective. I never thought Gyökeres was the answer, but what he did up front was exactly what he was supposed to do. They saw him as a threat, marked him out of the game, so that allowed everyone else to play. That's all he's for. He's not there to score 30 goals a season. Just remember that. Calm down.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If you were needing any reference point, Cole Palmer's Instagram story, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Pretty much sums it up. Who thought Palmer would be the voice of reason? But that is all we got time for this week. As always, please do consider subscribing to the channel. We want to hear your thoughts and feedback on what lessons you guys have learned from Game Week 1. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.